Thank you, everybody, and obviously thanks to the organisers for allowing us this opportunity to address the issues. I hope I'm going to be able to work this. Another good start. Maybe not. Yeah, just a few notes there with regards to the Fire Brigades unit. I think most in the room will be aware of it, but we do like to mention it from time to time. The fact that as one of the biggest organisations within the fire rescue service, we certainly do feel that we have an important contribution to make on behalf of the members. I won't go through the slide. I'll just leave it on the screen for a moment or two. It was said earlier on about how the question of operational guidance first started under Ken Knight in 2008, and certainly the Fire Brigades Union was very much keen on that process, had pushed for that, certainly since the demise of the CFBAC ourselves, alongside many other stakeholders and individuals within the fire and rescue service, felt that there was a real absence which created some of the problems which were identified during the other sessions by the other speakers, certainly in respect to the fact that guidance had become inconsistent, I think some said contradictory, and we'd identified that ourselves, I think stakeholders had, and for later on in this particular session and for the event itself, the key issue is that we don't return to that position whereby, as a result of a lack of funding or opportunity to involve ourselves in the production or updating of guidance, that we don't result in a situation whereby we have, frankly, the mess which the National Operational Guidance Programme is trying to address and correct. Got to say from the outset, we had some reservations as a union with regards to the process. We had some reservations in terms of how the work would progress and whether the products would be useful to the service. I've got to say, to a very large degree, we've been extremely pleased with the progress that has been made, the engagement, I think, as it says on the screen, hopefully it does, is that has been not just at the level that Roy was talking about within, if you like, let's call it the corporate or executive level, between the LGAC, FOA and London Fire Brigade, and more latterly with the devolved administration's representatives, but certainly with all stakeholders, including ourselves, as part of the, if you like, the subgroup on the operational guidance group. The differences that we identified, some still remain to a degree, but certainly what we have found is that many of those issues have been addressed and certainly lessened during the course of the production of the guidance and during the consultation phase, and indeed during the discussions that we've had in shaping that work on the operational guidance group itself. We've been extremely pleased with that, and I think it's been identified by everyone is that it's had what we always expected, and probably what is fairly self-evident is that it has been of mutual benefit to everyone to engage in that way. The session itself was about, or is about, that I'm delivering is about safety, public safety and firefighter safety. I think it's true to say that as far as we're concerned as a union, I think that is true of all those involved in the production of the work and the oversight of the work, is that actually there isn't a difference between how you achieve public safety or how you improve public safety and how you achieve or improve firefighter safety. Certainly for ourselves, we believe that they are the same, and we think they're delivered by these issues. I think the type is fairly small, so I will run through them. That is that you need to have fast call handling. You need to have fast mobilisation. You do need to have appliances which are fully equipped for what you might have to contend with on the incident ground. You do need to have early attendance, and not just the first appliance. You do need to have early attendance of the subsequent appliances to deal with that incident. You do need to have the right number of firefighters on the incident ground. You do need to have the right number of officers, and I'll use that term, officers, to deal with the incident for command and control. And you do need to ensure that you have correct, robust operational procedures, and that's where guidance kicks in. And we're very clear on that, and it's been a central part of the work throughout the work of the programme, both pre this year and obviously going forward until at least 2018 and hopefully beyond. But I suppose our main concerns that I just want to address, it's easy to look up here on the screen. Our main concerns really are that we do want to ensure that the guidance isn't just directed at how it might help produce a standard operating procedure or an element of standard operating procedure that can be used on the mix and match basis that was mentioned earlier. Because if operational guidance is aimed at policymakers, the job of policymakers isn't to transcribe it into operational procedures or technical notes for use in the fire and rescue service. Operational policymakers should be reporting within the command structure of the brigade, in turn that they can report to the Fire and Rescue Authority and say, actually, we may not be able to deliver, or rather, in order to be able to deliver, this is what we require the Fire and Rescue Authority. And in turn, the Fire and Rescue Authority needs to supply those resources, find the cash to do it, and if they haven't got the cash or the resources, then to demand it. And that's one thing that we are very clear on. It cannot simply be about reflecting what could be done within the cash envelope. It does need to be about what is required to deal with incidents, what is required for firefighters of all ranks on the incident ground to deal with the incident they're faced with. And when the operational guidance is produced, as it is being produced and we're a long way down that road, it is important that someone, somewhere, somehow we have a mechanism for ensuring, is it translating from operational guidance into good procedures and, more importantly, I suppose, into good practice, maintaining and creating firefighter safety and safety for the public. We don't have a mechanism within the Fire and Rescue Service. The National Operational Guidance Programme Board has ensured that we've picked up one half of what has been missing for a long time, certainly since 2004, the creation of guidance, but the other half is still not so much a mystery, but it certainly is. There is certainly a big gap there of ensuring that we're assured that we've got from here to there, from guidance to good practice, good local policy. Equally, and it was touched on to an extent, and I think it will be covered in some of the later sessions today. There is no mechanism to ensure that once those procedures are produced, based upon the guidance, that adequate training is being given across the entire service, whole time, retained, and also primarily to ensure that we have good command and control. And I'll touch on that later for by the implementation of good training for officers that will carry out that command and control function. In essence, the assessment processes for fire and rescue services is poor. I think I'll speed up a little bit. On the question of the way the guidance is produced, it's something which has been addressed, has been identified, something that we have, frankly, it's in our nature, moaned about, and that is the question that we feel that by the way that it's scoped, by the way that it's phrased, by some of the missing elements within guidance, is that it has the effect, or is likely to have the effect, and in some of the translations that we've seen, does have the effect of putting too much onus on the incident commander. It sort of goes back to the point about resources. Is that if incident commanders haven't got sufficient resources, they are having to think on their feet, and let's face it, for most of you that in the room who have been or still are both incident commanders or more senior rank now, certainly the question of having that responsibility whilst you're trying to deal with the incident isn't good for firefighter operations. And that goes on to the second point on the screen. Whilst we do have predetermined attendances, they are there to ensure that we have resources as expected. We know that all incidents will be bigger when you get there than can be pre-planned. You can't plan for the worst case scenario on all occasions. But when an incident commander is on the incident ground trying to deal with information, trying to get people to work to his or her command, the one thing that he or she shouldn't need to worry about is ensuring they've actually got enough to carry out the basic tasks on the fire ground, and that's why it's important that those issues, those questions of resources, we feel should be contained within the guidance. And we have, and it was touched on earlier, the question of operational discretion. It is undoubtedly true that where we have had these rigid, formulaic, standard operating procedures, and when they have been applied in a very rigid, strict way on the incident ground, to the point on some key issues, to the point of inaction, it has created problems, it has created deaths or serious injury, either for firefighters or more pointedly for members of the public as well. Hence the morphing away from, if you like, the fixed standard operating procedures. But one thing that we are clear on is that guidance and standing operating procedures cannot be written so vague that actually there isn't an understanding of what you should be doing. It cannot be, not so much an excuse, but it cannot leave a vacuum of knowledge such that it leads to not working to a safe practice. And it's finding the balance in that. I think it was said earlier by David, is that when you turn up an incident, if it's something new, something unexpected, then you have to think on your feet. Operational judgment, got no problem with that as a union. It's what you do with that information after, because if it is something which hasn't been seen before, isn't expected, what do you do with it? Do you just deal with it on the incident ground? You have to. Or, as we would see it, you need to go back and say, well, why is there a gap in our knowledge? Why is there a gap in the operational guidance to deal with those issues? That's a key issue for us to ensure that we maintain safe practice. That said, it sounds critical. I suppose it is critical in some ways. One thing we are very much aware of and are experiencing is that those issues, those concerns are being addressed and not ignored. They remain, but they're not being ignored. And that's a progressive thing. In terms of operational guidance for the future, much as people don't seem to like it, and certainly we understand the requirements of local demography, if nothing else, or local demographics, if nothing else, and local topography, is that there should be a tendency towards standardised procedures across the UK. Whether that will happen, will we ever know? We haven't got a process by which we could see if there are standardised procedures, and more importantly, if there are good procedures around the UK, a point I touched on earlier. In terms of what could be the role or should be the role once the guidance has been produced, it's been touched on, the question of ensuring there is quality, the question of reviewing and updating, and that is no small task. Slight concern, apologies to Claire because she's left, but it's slight concern that I picked up from what DCLG's view is, actually that's just a minor task. It's all electronic, it's a fairly minor thing to do. It's not, it's a major thing to do. Because as someone else said earlier, I think it was Gareth Bacon said it, frankly, the creation of guidance was prompted for many other reasons, but including the central one of exposure. Exposure to risk to the fire authority by not having guidance which was appropriate or up to date. And we cannot afford to go back to that situation. I think the scope of that job shouldn't be underestimated. We do think the guidance needs to be as comprehensive as possible, and also there are other areas of work, and I think Roy touched on those, the question of moving into new areas, whether it is procurement, whether it is the issues of research, for example. Complete vacuum in the fire and rescue service on the question of research.
Closing remarks, please, Andy.
Wind it up.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no problem. So just in summary then, we do believe that it's a very good programme. We do think it needs to be well resourced. Heard what Claire said on behalf of DCLG. We've got half the money, half to come, checks in the post, but it could bounce. We do think that I've got to laugh, worry. We don't think it can be triple funding. The problem is it cannot be there in the hope that fire and rescue authorities will be able to squeeze the money. It should be there allocated from the governments, plural across the UK, in advance, so that fire and rescue authorities don't have to make the choice between giving money for guidance and what they supply in terms of fire cover. We believe it should be supplemented by the missing factor, which is the question of assessment, assurance and inspection, and clearly the National Audit Office report in terms of the impact of funding on fire and rescue services and the fact it is a measure may offer some opportunities to address those key issues. Apologies for taking too much time, but thank you very much.